After that night, nothing inside the kitchen felt familiar anymore. The burners were the same. The stainless steel counters still carried faint scratches from years of service. The walk-in still hummed with the same low mechanical breath. But the air itself had changed, colder somehow, like the room no longer recognized the people standing inside it. Marcus Hayes stood at his station, hands resting flat on the counter, feeling the weight of 42 years settle into his shoulders. 18 of those years had been spent in this kitchen. Long nights, burned scars, missed birthdays, quiet pride. And now, standing here in his pressed black chef's coat, he felt like a guest who had stayed too long. No one spoke. Not a single pan moved. Not a single knife tapped against wood. The line cooks kept their eyes down, suddenly very interested in their shoes. The floor drains. Anything but him. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual, filling the silence like an accusation. Marcus noticed the looks before he heard any words. The sideways glances. The quick shifts away when he met someone's eyes. It wasn't hostility exactly. It was something worse. Distance. As if something had already happened and everyone else knew it but him. The dining room lights were dim. Mid-afternoon service long over. A half-cleared table near the window still held a folded linen napkin and 2 untouched wine glasses. Evidence of guests who had left early, in a hurry. Uncomfortable. Marcus breathed in slowly. Butter, deglazed wine, a trace of burned time, the smell of a place that had once felt like home. Now it felt like a courtroom after the verdict. Someone cleared their throat behind him. Marcus didn't turn, he didn't need to. He could hear it in the way the air shifted, the way people leaned back just slightly, as if giving space around him, like a quiet agreement had been reached without his consent. "You good, Marcus?" a voice asked. Too casual, too careful. He nodded once. "Yeah, I'm good." The words tasted like a lie, but he swallowed them anyway. Respect had always lived here before. It had been built slowly, over time, earned through consistency, through showing up early and leaving last, through never sending out a plate he wouldn't serve to his own family. Now that respect felt cracked, not shattered, cracked, the kind of damage that doesn't make noise right away. Marcus glanced at the clock above the pass, 6:12 p.m. Dinner service would start soon. He wondered briefly how many of the guests tonight would sense it, that something was off, that the warmth had gone missing. People always noticed more than they admitted, especially when something real disappeared. Behind him, a young cook shifted nervously. "Chef?" Marcus turned then. The kid's eyes flickered, unsure, apologetic, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how without crossing an invisible line. Marcus waited. Nothing came. That was when he felt it fully. The quiet humiliation. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a slow, heavy realization settling in his chest. Whatever had happened didn't just affect him. It had changed the room. He straightened his coat, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle near the buttons. A small, controlled movement. Muscle memory, dignity on autopilot. "I'll be on the line tonight," he said evenly. Same as always. No one answered. The silence wasn't defiance. It was fear, the kind that spreads quickly when power shifts hands and nobody knows where they stand anymore. Marcus turned back to his station. For a brief second, just a second, his reflection caught in the steel surface of the counter. Older than he remembered, tired, but still standing. Whatever people thought had happened, whatever they believed he had done, they were only seeing the aftermath, not the hours before it. Not the quiet decision made in the dark, not the dedication that had unfolded long before anyone was watching. And Marcus knew with a certainty that tightened his jaw that whatever line had been crossed could not be uncrossed. The kitchen would keep its secrets, but consequences he had learned never stayed silent for long. A few months earlier, the kitchen still ran on rhythm instead of fear. Marcus arrived every morning before sunrise, the city quiet and half asleep. He unlocked the back door, flicked on the lights one by one, and began the same routine he had followed for years. Knives sharpened, stations wiped down twice, not once. Inventory checked without being asked. When a delivery came in short, he adjusted portions without sending anything back to the dining room that did not meet the standard. No speeches, no announcements, just work. If a cook called out sick, Marcus filled the gap. If a plate came back untouched, he fixed it himself without blaming anyone. When tensions flared during service, his voice stayed low and even. "Breathe," he would say. "We've got time." People listened, not because he demanded it, but because he earned it. At the center of that calm was Antoine Mercier. Antoine stood at the pass with white hair tucked neatly under his cap, hands steady despite his age. He moved like a conductor, calling orders in a mix of French and English, correcting sauces with a taste and a nod. "Marcus," Antoine said one afternoon, watching him plate, "you don't rush food. That's rare now." Marcus shrugged. "Food remembers how you treat it." Antoine smiled at that. He smiled often around Marcus. When service ended, Antoine would linger, sharing stories while the staff meal cooled. He saved Marcus the best cut without comment, sliding the plate toward him like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You hold this place together," Antoine said once, resting a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "One day, it'll need you more than it knows." Marcus never replied to comments like that. He believed in systems, in process, in patience. If you did things right, the structure would stand. The heart attack came on a Tuesday morning, quiet and fast, in the walk-in cooler. By the time the ambulance arrived, Antoine was already gone. The funeral was crowded, black coats, soft music, chefs from other restaurants standing in the back, heads bowed. Marcus wore his black suit from the closet he only opened for weddings and funerals, hands folded, jaw clenched tight. He told himself the kitchen would survive. By Monday, Richard Thornton walked through the door. 29, clean haircut, tailored jacket, an MBA confidence that did not ask for permission. He brought 3 men in suits who never stepped into the kitchen, just glanced around like they were evaluating real estate. "I'm the new owner," Richard announced. "We're going to modernize, streamline, improve margins." Marcus stood in the back, still wearing that same black suit. He nodded once. The first week, Claudia was fired, 60 years old pastry chef. "Too expensive," Richard said. The second week, the fish supplier changed, frozen instead of fresh. Better numbers. The third week, staff meal was cut. Their employees, not family. Marcus noticed the portions shrink, the sauces thin out. He said nothing. When Richard walked through the kitchen, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do we really need all this prep? Seems complicated. Not sure our clientele will appreciate that kind of flavor." One afternoon, watching Marcus break down a duck, Richard tilted his head. "You learn this in school or just pick it up?" Marcus didn't look up. Culinary Institute of America, class of 2005. "Huh," Richard said. "Good for you." Marcus believed silence was strength. That professionalism was protection, if he stayed focused, if he kept standards high, if he waited it out. The system would correct itself. One evening, the lights in the kitchen went dark earlier than usual. Service cut short. Fewer reservations. Marcus stood alone, wiping down his station, watching the reflection of the empty room in the steel. He turned off the last burner himself, earlier than he ever had before, and for the first time, he wondered if doing everything right was quietly leading him somewhere very wrong. It happened during dinner service. Not in the kitchen, not behind closed doors, but out where everyone could see. Marcus was finishing a plate at the pass when Richard's voice cut through the room, sharp and casual, the way people speak when they think they are untouchable. "Marcus, come here." The dining room was full. 42 diners, conversations low, glasses clinking, the kind of night the restaurant used to live for. Marcus wiped his hands and stepped forward. Richard held up the plate like it offended him. He turned it slightly, inspecting it under the light. "You call this refined," Richard said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "My dog would turn his nose up at this." A few heads turned. Marcus felt the heat rise in his neck, but his face stayed still. "If there's an issue, I can remake it." Richard laughed. "An issue? This is not some neighborhood spot where you throw flavors together and hope no one notices. This is a $200 a plate restaurant. Standards matter." A woman at table 12 shifted in her seat. Her daughters stopped talking. Richard leaned closer. "I don't pay you to cook like you're back wherever you learn this." The words landed. Heavy, deliberate. Marcus heard them echo in his chest. Years of discipline told him to keep his voice even. "Yes, chef," he said quietly. Richard wiped his hands on Marcus's towel and dropped it on the floor between them. Redo it. And remember, you work for me now, not my uncle." The room went silent. Marcus bent down, picked up the towel, folded it neatly, placed it back on his station. "Understood," he said. He did not look at the diners. He did not look at Richard, but he felt the shift, respect draining out of the room. Something breaking that would not be repaired. That night, Marcus rode the bus home instead of driving. He needed the time, the noise, anything to keep his thoughts from spiraling. At his apartment, the kitchen light flickered as he flipped it on. The fridge hummed. A stack of unopened mail waited on the counter. He opened the bank app on his phone. $3,000. Rent due. Tuition notice from Naya's school sitting unread in his inbox. Nia came home late, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair pulled back tight. She saw his face and stopped. What happened? Marcus sat at the table. They crossed a line today. She waited. He told her everything. The plate, the towel, the words. Her jaw tightened. That's discrimination. He shook his head. That's power. So what are you going to do? Sue him. Marcus laughed once. No humor in it. People like us don't win those fights. So you just take it. He didn't answer. After she went to her room, Marcus opened his locker bag from work. At the bottom was the leather notebook Antoine had given him days before he died. Inside were notes, recipes, and a sealed envelope with his name written in Antoine's shaky handwriting. "Open when you need me most." Marcus stared at it for a long time. Then he broke the seal. The letter inside was short, direct, written like Antoine knew exactly what was coming. "There is a box in the walk-in, behind the milk crates. Code is your daughter's birthday. Inside are the recipes I never shared. Cook them when the moment comes, not for approval, for truth." Marcus sat back, breath shallow. At the bottom of the envelope was a small brass key, the back door key. That was when he understood. This was not about rebellion. It was about dignity. At 2:58 a.m., Marcus stood in the alley behind the restaurant, the city asleep around him. The key was warm in his hand. He unlocked the door and stepped inside alone. The kitchen lights clicked on. The light came up in sections. First the prep area, then the line, then the pass. Soft white against steel, revealing a room that felt smaller at night, stripped of its performance. Marcus stood still and listened. No voices, no footsteps. Just the low breath of refrigeration and the faint ticking of cooling metal. The kitchen did not judge him. It never had. He set his knife roll on the counter and opened it with care, lining the blades the way Antoine had taught him. Straight, parallel, no rush. Ritual mattered, even now. In the walk-in, cold air spilled across the floor. Marcus moved the milk crates aside and found the box where Antoine said it would be. Metal, scuffed, waiting. He punched in the code. The lock clicked. Inside was a leather folder, thick with pages, the corners softened by use. Marcus lifted it out like it might be warm. The titles were written by hand, dates, notes in the margins. For your grandmother, for the people who say we do not belong, for when the world forgets. His throat tightened. These were not menu items. They were stories. Technique meeting memory, precision carrying history. Marcus closed the folder and set it on the prep station. He looked around the kitchen one more time. The empty shelves, the bins of ingredients Richard had labeled waste, shrimp too small, cod scraps, bruised sweet potatoes, bacon ends no one wanted. Perfect. He tied his apron. At exactly 3 o'clock, Marcus started cooking. He did not rush. He did not improvise. Every motion had intention. He peeled shrimp with practiced ease, checking each one. He trimmed fish carefully, fingertips searching for bones by feel, not sight. He rinsed mussels, listening for the quiet click that meant they were alive. Olive oil warmed in the pot. Fennel, onion, garlic. He let them sweat, coaxing sweetness instead of forcing it. Tomato paste bloomed dark and rich before wine hit the pan and hissed. Back. The spices came next. Saffron first, respecting tradition, then just enough of the blend Antoine had written about. Not loud, not hidden, balanced. Marcus tasted, adjusted, tasted again. This was not defiance. This was conversation. As the broth simmered, he thought about the dining room earlier that night, about the woman who had gathered her daughters and left, about the way the room had gone quiet when Richard spoke. Marcus had spent years believing that if he stayed composed, the system would eventually correct itself. that excellence would be enough. Standing alone in the kitchen, he finally understood the flaw in that thinking. Systems protect comfort, not truth. The seafood went in gently, shrimp turning pink, fish flaking clean, mussels opening, releasing the ocean into the pot. Marcus plated carefully, arranging each piece like it mattered, because it did. He took one spoonful. The flavors came in waves, familiar and new at the same time. His grandmother's kitchen, Antoine's discipline, his own hands in the middle, steady and sure. Marcus closed his eyes. This was what had been taken from him, not the job, the permission to be fully seen. He cleaned as he went, wiped down surfaces, returned every ingredient to its place, left no trace of rebellion behind, only excellence. When he finished, the sky outside the back door had lightened just slightly, the city beginning to stir. Marcus turned off the burners one by one. He left the prep lights on a moment longer and looked at the folder again. He did not know what would come of this. He did not know if anyone would ever taste what he had just made, but he knew this. He would not beg. He would not perform anger for an audience. He would not leave in shame. If the world was going to see him, it would be on his terms. Marcus turned off the last light and locked the door behind him, carrying the quiet with him into the dawn. Marcus went back the next night, and the night after that. 3 a.m. became a habit he never planned to form. The city asleep, the alley dark, his key turning slowly in the lock, every click sounding louder than it should. Each time he stepped inside, his heart raced the same way. Not from excitement, from risk. From the awareness that one wrong moment could end everything. A passing car, a security patrol, Richard deciding to check inventory at an odd hour. Every set of headlights that swept across the back window made his chest tighten. Every distant siren sharpened his focus. He cooked anyway. Marcus learned to move quieter, shoes placed carefully, drawers closed by hand instead of letting them slide. The kitchen felt different at night, smaller, more honest. He worked with what the day crew left behind. Shrimp labeled seconds, fish trimmed too aggressively and deemed unusable, produce with bruises that would never see the dining room, the things Richard called waste. Marcus saw potential. He simmered stock from bones no one bothered to save, reduced sauces until they spoke, turned tough cuts into something tender and patient, food that required attention instead of money. Each dish felt like a quiet argument, not spoken, just placed. During the day, Richard's presence grew heavier. He walked through the kitchen with his phone out, voice raised just enough. Margins are down. We need speed. He fired another cook without warning, then another. People stopped asking questions. When Marcus suggested adjustments, Richard waved him off. That's old thinking. Once, Richard watched him plate and shook his head. You're talented, Marcus, but talent like yours needs direction. Marcus nodded, said nothing. DeAndre Brooks worked the station next to him, young and careful, eyes always moving. One afternoon, as Richard left the kitchen, DeAndre leaned in. Chef, he whispered, this place feels wrong now. Marcus met his eyes. Do your work. Keep your head down. DeAndre wanted to say more. Marcus could see it. Fear held him still. At home, Marcus dreamed of his grandmother's kitchen, cast iron pans, slow Sundays, no rush, no permission needed to cook with care. He woke up each morning, tired but steady. The nights were where he felt whole again. On the fourth night, as he cleaned down, Marcus paused and looked at the folder of recipes. Antoine's handwriting, the notes meant for a future that had almost been erased. This could not stay hidden forever. That same night, at his kitchen table, Marcus opened his laptop. He typed a name he had not said out loud in years, Simone Carter. He read her articles slowly, carefully. Her words carried weight, integrity. Marcus stared at the empty email draft for a long time. Then he began to write. Marcus deleted the first email, then the second. Each version sounded wrong. Too desperate, too careful, too much like asking for permission. He closed the laptop and sat back, rubbing his hands together, the faint smell of garlic and metal still clinging to his skin. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of traffic drifting in from the street below. This was the part he hated, not the risk, not the exhaustion, the waiting. He thought about the kitchen during the day, about how conversation stopped when Richard entered, how laughter had disappeared, replaced by short answers and lowered voices, how people avoided Marcus's station now, not out of disrespect, but fear of being seen too close to him. Excellence had made him visible once. Now it made him dangerous. The next night, a car idled longer than usual in the alley. Marcus froze mid-chop, knife suspended in the air. His heart slammed so hard he could feel it in his throat. He killed the lights without thinking and stood still, counting his breath. 1, 2, 3. The engine eventually pulled away. Marcus leaned against the counter until the shaking passed, then turned the lights back on and went right back to work. That scared him, more than anything else. How quickly fear had become something he could step over. During service the following evening, Richard made a point of standing near the pass. "See this," he said to a group of servers, gesturing at a plate Marcus had sent out. "This is why we need to simplify. Too much personality confuses the brand." Marcus heard it, pretended not to. Afterward, DeAndre lingered by the sinks, drying the same pan twice. "You ever think about leaving?" DeAndre asked quietly. Marcus looked at him, really looked at him, young, talented, already learning when to shrink. "Every day," Marcus said, "but leaving isn't the same as escaping." DeAndre nodded like he understood more than he wanted to. That night, Marcus cooked again, and again the next night. The dishes grew sharper, more confident. He stopped second-guessing himself, stopped cooking like someone waiting to be approved. He started cooking like someone who knew. At 2:45 in the morning, Marcus finally opened the laptop again. This time, he did not overthink it. "Ms. Carter, you once wrote that food remembers who made it. There is something happening at Bordeaux that you should see. Not during service, not for show. Come at 3 a.m. Use the back door. Come alone." Antoine would have wanted it this way. He stared at the screen. Then he pressed send. The email vanished. Marcus closed the laptop and sat there, hands flat on the table, chest tight. He had crossed into something irreversible now, not because of what he had done, but because of who he had invited to witness it. Outside, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. Inside, Marcus felt the quiet settle around him again. This was no longer about survival. It was a gamble, and once the bet was placed, there would be no walking it back. The kitchen lights were already on. That was the first thing Marcus noticed when he stepped through the back door. Not the soft prep lights he used at night. The full overheads. Bright. Exposing. Wrong. He froze. The air felt heavier, charged in a way it never had before. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder, sharper, like it was warning him. Then he saw Richard, standing at the prep station, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he was trying on authority he did not understand. His phone was in his hand, screen glowing, inventory spreadsheet open. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched long enough to hurt. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard finally said. Marcus did not raise his voice. "Cooking." Richard laughed, sharp and humorless. "At 2 in the morning, in a restaurant you do not own, using a key you were never given. Antoine gave it to me." Richard's face hardened. "Antoine is dead." The words were meant to wound. They landed clean. Richard stepped closer. "Everything he owned is mine now. This building, this kitchen, that key, and you." Marcus felt his pulse in his ears, but his feet stayed planted. "I haven't stolen anything," Marcus said. "I used what you were going to throw away." Richard glanced at the pot on the stove, the plated dish resting nearby. His lip curled. "Playing chef in the dark now? You think this is some kind of statement?" "It's work," Marcus said. "The same work I've done here for 18 years. Richard pulled out his phone. "I should call the police. Breaking and entering. Theft. You would be in a cell before sunrise." Marcus believed him. That was the power Richard wanted him to feel. The reminder that the system would always choose the man with the title. "You're fired," Richard said. "Effective immediately." The words echoed in the empty room. "And if you make this difficult," Richard continued, "I will press charges. I'll change the locks. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Marcus nodded once, not in agreement, in acknowledgement. He untied his apron slowly, folded it the way Antoine taught him. Neat, respectful, final. At home, the conversation was quieter, but no less heavy. Nia sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. She listened without interrupting, eyes narrowing with every detail. "He can't do that," she said finally. "That's not right." Marcus managed a small smile. "Right and legal aren't always the same thing." "So that's it?" she asked. 18 years, and you just walk away?" Marcus looked at his hands, scarred, steady. "I walked out with my dignity," he said. "That's not nothing." Later alone, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the folder of recipes beside him. Fired, unprotected. The system had spoken clearly, and yet beneath the humiliation, something else remained. Certainty. The knock at the door came just before dawn. Marcus opened it to find a woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes standing in the hallway. "Marcus Hayes?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Simone Carter," she said. "I got your email." The truth had arrived. Marcus did not invite her in right away. He stood there for a second barefoot on cold tile, trying to place the moment inside his body. Fired hours earlier, sleep-deprived, pride bruised in places he did not know still hurt. And now the one person who could change everything was standing in his hallway like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Simone Carter looked past him, not rudely, just observant. She noticed the knife roll on the chair, the faint smell of stock still clinging to the air, the leather folder on the table. "You look like someone who hasn't slept," she said. Marcus stepped aside. "I haven't." She entered, set her coat down carefully. "Good, neither have I." They sat at the small kitchen table. No performance, no pleasantries. "I went to the restaurant," Simone said. 3 nights ago. After your email." Marcus's chest tightened. "You didn't go inside." "I did," she replied. "At 3 in the morning, back door. Just like you said." He let the breath out slowly. "I watched you cook," she continued. "I didn't announce myself. I didn't interrupt. I sat in the dark by the prep station and listened." Marcus closed his eyes. "You worked like someone who knew exactly why he was there," Simone said. "No wasted movement, no ego, no rush. That doesn't come from ambition. That comes from devotion." Marcus swallowed. "He fired me tonight." "I know," she said. "Richard Thornton called me an hour ago. He was very eager to explain his version of events." "And?" Simone's mouth tightened, and he sounded like a man terrified of losing control. She leaned forward. "Marcus, do you know how many kitchens I've walked into where talent was hidden behind obedience, where the wrong people were protected by titles and the right ones were told to wait their turn?" Marcus said nothing. "I also know this," she went on. "People like Richard don't recognize dedication unless it's loud. They mistake silence for weakness." She reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook. Pages filled, margins marked. "What you cooked at 3 a.m., she said, tapping the notebook, "was not rebellion. It was truth. And truth has a way of breaking systems that pretend not to see it." Marcus stared at the table. "I don't have a job." Simone nodded. "You also don't have anything left to lose." That landed harder than he expected. Outside, morning traffic began to stir. A bus hissed to a stop. Life moving forward, indifferent to what had just fallen apart. Simone stood. "I'm writing about you," she said. "Not as a victim, as a warning." Marcus looked up. "To who?" "To every system that thinks dedication can be exploited quietly forever." She paused at the door. "You took a risk most people never do. You didn't ask to be seen. You just kept showing up." The door closed behind her. Marcus sat alone again. He was unemployed, exposed, pushed to the edge of the life he had built. But for the first time since Antoine died, the weight in his chest shifted. The loss was real. So was what came next. Simone did not rush the first bite. She sat at Marcus's small kitchen table while the city outside moved through its morning routines. Coffee cups clinked somewhere down the block. A delivery truck idled, then pulled away. Ordinary life continuing as if nothing important were happening. Marcus set the bowl down in front of her without explanation. "This is what I was cooking at 3 a.m., he said. Simone studied the dish first. The color, the balance, the restraint. She leaned in slightly, breathing it in before touching her spoon. She tasted, and then she paused. Not in surprise, not in shock, in recognition. She took another bite. slower this time, letting the flavors unfold instead of chasing them. She closed her eyes briefly, not for drama, but because something in the food asked for attention. This wasn't made to impress, she said quietly. It was made to speak. Marcus watched her hands, steady, unhurried, the way Antoine used to taste. I've eaten at kitchens with stars on their doors, Simone continued, places that charge more for the story than the food. This isn't that. She looked up at him. This is someone who knows exactly who they are and stopped asking permission. Marcus felt the words settle deep. He had not realized how long he had been waiting to hear something like that said out loud. I've been in this industry for 22 years, Simone said. Do you know how often I see talent disappear because it refuses to shout? Marcus shook his head. Everywhere, she replied, especially from people who were taught that silence equals professionalism. She pushed the bowl aside and opened her notebook. Pages filled with notes from the night she watched him cook. Movements, timing, ingredients he turned into something else entirely. You weren't hiding, she said. You were being buried. The phrase hit harder than any insult Richard had thrown. Simone leaned back. Here's the part you don't know yet. Marcus stilled. I spoke with Antoine's attorney this morning, she said. Not because I was looking for drama, because something didn't sit right. Antoine wasn't careless. Men like him don't build legacies without contingencies. Marcus felt a tightening in his chest. What kind of contingencies? Simone met his eyes. The kind that protect the person doing the real work. She slid a folded document across the table. Not the whole thing. Just enough to see Antoine's name. Legal language. Dates. There's a clause tied to ownership, she said. A safeguard. It anticipates mismanagement, decline, exploitation. Marcus stared at the paper. You're saying he planned for this. I'm saying Antoine understood systems better than Richard ever will, Simone replied. And he trusted you long before anyone else did. The room felt very still. For the first time since that night in the dining room, Marcus did not feel small. He felt positioned. All this time, he said slowly, I thought staying quiet was survival. Simone shook her head. No, it was preparation. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Images rushed through him. The nights alone in the kitchen, the fear, the discipline, the restraint. None of it wasted. Silence had not weakened him. It had sharpened him. He looked at Simone. What happens now? She closed her notebook. Now you decide how visible you want to be. Marcus glanced at the window, morning light filling the room. He knew one thing for certain. When he stepped forward, it would not be out of anger. It would be with clarity. Marcus didn't speak right away. He picked up the folded document again, not to read it more closely, but to feel its weight between his fingers. Paper shouldn't feel heavy, but this did. It carried intention, foresight, trust that had been placed quietly, without ceremony. All this time, Marcus said, more to himself than to Simone, I thought Antoine believed in me as a cook. Simone watched him carefully. He believed in you as a guardian. The word landed differently. Marcus thought back to the moments he had dismissed. Antoine insisting Marcus learn the business side, not just the line. Antoine asking him to sit in on supplier calls. Antoine correcting him when he underpriced his own labor. At the time, Marcus had thought it was mentorship. Now he saw it for what it was. Preparation. He knew Richard would inherit, Marcus said, and he knew what would happen. Yes, Simone replied, but more importantly, he knew who would still be standing when it did. Marcus exhaled slowly. Not relief, recognition. So I'm not just reacting, he said. I'm stepping into something that was already set in motion. Simone nodded. You were never meant to fight from the ground. You were meant to rise from within the structure. That reframed everything. Marcus had spent months absorbing pressure, believing silence was the cost of survival, believing professionalism meant endurance without response. He saw now how incomplete that belief had been. Silence was not surrender. Silence was control. Richard thinks he took something from me, Marcus said. My job. My standing. Simone's eyes sharpened. He took your cover, that's all. Marcus felt a quiet resolve settle in his chest. Not vengeance, not triumph. Something steadier. I won't humiliate him, Marcus said. I won't burn the place down just to prove a point. Simone smiled slightly. Good. That would be noise. Marcus stood and walked to the sink, rinsing the bowl Simone had emptied. He moved with the same care he always had. No rush, no wasted motion. "When this comes out," he said, "people are going to expect anger." "They always do," Simone replied, "especially when they think they understand the story before it's told." Marcus dried his hands and turned back to her. "Then I'll give them something else." "What's that?" "The truth," he said, "and the work." Outside, the city was fully awake now. Car doors slammed. Someone laughed on the sidewalk. Life pressing forward, unaware of the shift that had just occurred in a quiet apartment kitchen. Simone gathered her things. "I'll be in touch," she said. "Sooner than you think." Marcus walked her to the door. When it closed, he stood there for a moment, listening to the silence that followed. It felt different now. Not heavy, not isolating, purposeful. Marcus returned to the table and looked once more at Antoine's handwriting on the page. The man had seen farther than Marcus ever realized. He folded the document carefully and placed it back inside the leather folder. Then he picked up his phone, not to argue, not to accuse, not to defend himself, but to prepare. When Marcus Hayes stepped into the light, it would not be with rage or spectacle. It would be with ownership. Richard Thornton lost the restaurant quietly. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match in the dining room, no headlines screaming scandal. It happened the way most power collapses happen in real life. Through meetings, documents, phone calls that stopped being returned. The numbers did the talking first. Revenue down, reviews slipping, staff turnover impossible to ignore, investors asking questions Richard could not answer with confidence or charm. The place was bleeding, not because the food had no potential, but because the people who carried its soul had been treated as replaceable. When the legal notice arrived, Richard read it 3 times before it sank in. Antoine had built a safeguard into the will, a contingency tied to mismanagement, a path for transfer if the restaurant's standards declined under new ownership. And Marcus Hayes was named. Richard sat alone in Antoine's old office, the walls repainted cold gray, the warmth stripped out months earlier. He stared at the signature at the bottom of the document, his uncle's handwriting, familiar, unforgiving. He thought back to that night in the kitchen, the way Marcus stood his ground without raising his voice, the way the food had tasted, honest, layered, alive. Richard had mistaken restraint for weakness. He requested a meeting. Marcus arrived without an entourage, no lawyer at his side, just a clean jacket and the same steady presence he had always carried. They sat across from each other at the long table in the private dining room. "I didn't lose it because of you," Richard said finally. "I lost it because I didn't understand it." Marcus listened. "I thought running a restaurant was about control," Richard continued, "about cutting costs, about efficiency. I never learned how to see people." That was the admission. Small, late, real. Marcus nodded once. "Understanding usually comes after damage." Richard let out a breath. "What happens now?" "I take responsibility," Marcus said. "For the place. For the people." Richard hesitated. "And me." Marcus considered him carefully. "You walk away with the lesson." There was no satisfaction in it. Just closure. The first calls Marcus made were not to press or investors. He called the people who had been let go. Claudia, Maria, James. "I'm reopening," he told them, "and I want you back. Not as employees, as partners." There was silence on the other end of the line, then disbelief, then tears. When Marcus walked back into the kitchen as its owner, the room felt different. Not triumphant, grounded. DeAndre stood near the line, eyes wide. "Chef, is it true?" Marcus smiled. "It is." The price Marcus paid could not be measured in money. 18 years of being overlooked, of having his restraint mistaken for submission, of swallowing moments that should never have been swallowed. His dignity had been tested. His name dragged quietly through rooms he never entered. But as he stood there, keys in hand, the weight lifted. Marcus Hayes was no longer invisible, and that changed everything. The dining room stayed closed for a week, not for renovations, not for rebranding, for listening. Marcus walked the space every morning before anyone else arrived. He touched the backs of chairs, straightened tables that did not need it. Let the quiet speak. This place had been rushed through too many changes without anyone asking what it needed to survive. When the staff returned, it wasn't with speeches. Claudia arrived first, hair pulled back, eyes cautious. She stopped just inside the kitchen and looked around like she was afraid it might disappear again. "You're really back," she said. "So are you," Marcus replied. Maria followed, then James. Each reunion carried its own pause, its own history. Marcus did not apologize for the past. He acknowledged it. "I should have protected this place sooner," he told them. "I didn't. That's on me." No one argued. They understood accountability when they heard it. Marcus laid out the plan plainly. Shared ownership, transparent numbers, decisions made at the table, not behind closed doors. No one was promised comfort, only respect. "This doesn't work if it's about me," Marcus said. "It only works if it's about us." They agreed. Richard came by once quietly, near the end of the week. No jacket, no phone in hand. He stood at the edge of the dining room, watching the kitchen come back to life. Marcus met him halfway. "I never meant to erase what my uncle built," Richard said. "I just didn't know how to carry it." Marcus looked past him into the kitchen, the rhythm returning. The laughter cautious but real. "Some things can't be carried," Marcus said. "They have to be understood." Richard nodded. "I see that now." There was no handshake, just a mutual recognition that something had ended the way it needed to. Opening night came without fanfare. No press release, no announcement, just food served the way it was meant to be. With care, with patience, with truth. A young man waited after service, nervous, hands clasped tight. "Chef Hayes," he said, "I just wanted to say, seeing you back there made me think maybe there's room for people like me in kitchens like this." Marcus held his gaze. There always was. The final price had been steep. Time. Silence. Dignity tested to its limit. But the return was quiet and lasting. Marcus Hayes stood in the light now. Not because he demanded it, because he had earned it. The restaurant reopened without ceremony. No banners, no speeches, no attempt to rewrite the past as something prettier than it was. The lights came on one by one, the kitchen filled with familiar sounds, knives on boards, oil warming in pans, voices calling back orders with calm confidence, not louder than before, just steadier. Word spread the way it always does when something real returns. Quietly, honestly, a new crowd found its way in, not just diners chasing trends, but people who stayed after their plates were cleared, people who watched the kitchen through the pass, curious about the rhythm, about the way the team moved like they trusted each other. Young cooks applied for stages. Students from community colleges and culinary programs showed up early, notebooks in hand, eyes wide. They asked questions Marcus had once been afraid to ask himself. Is it really possible to do it the right way? Marcus never gave speeches in response. He showed them. He corrected gently. He listened fully. He stayed late when someone needed help and left early when they needed rest. He taught technique, yes, but more than that, he taught restraint, the discipline of waiting, the strength of not rushing to prove yourself. Marcus Hayes never became a perfect hero. He still carried the weight of the years he had been overlooked, the nights he had swallowed his anger, the moments when silence had felt too close to surrender. But he no longer confused those scars with weakness. He understood now what they had shaped. Dedication was not something you performed when the room was full. It was something you practiced when no one was watching, when the lights were low, when the system offered no applause and no protection. One night, after service, Marcus stood alone in the kitchen and turned off the lights, all except the one above the pass. The same light he used to cook under in the dark. He left it on, not as a secret anymore, as a reminder, because not every kind of commitment announces itself. Some dedication happens in silence, long before the world decides it is ready to look. And sometimes the quietest dedication leaves the loudest echo.